The next session from international guest lecture with the speaker Mr. Banu Prakash Luna, PhD from RV University, India. It will be guided by Mrs. Eros Melina Sofa as the moderator. For Mrs. Eros Melina Sofa, please take your place. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Director of UIN Kiai Haji Abdul Rahman Wahid Pekalongan, Professor Dr. Zainal Mustaqim, the Honorable Vice Rectors of UIN Kiai Haji Abdul Rahman Wahid Pekalongan, the Honorable the Head of International Office of UIN Kiai Haji Abdul Rahman Wahid Pekalongan, Ibu Isriani Hanimi PhD, the Honorable the Dean of Syariah Faculty of UIN Kiai Haji Abdul Rahman Wahid Pekalongan, Dr. Ahmad Jalaluddin, the Honorable the Vice Dean and the Head of Unit of UIN Kiai Haji Abdul Rahman Wahid Pekalongan, and also the Head of Department in Syariah Faculty of UIN Kiai Haji Abdul Rahman Wahid Pekalongan, and respectable all the participants that are joining in this international guest lecture organized by International Office, collaborated with Syariah Faculty of UIN Kiai Haji Abdul Rahman Wahid Pekalongan, and special thanks to Mr. Banu Prakash Luna. Welcome to Pekalongan, Mr. Luna. Okay, is this your first time to Pekalongan, Mr.? Oh, to this one. Oh, but to Indonesia 5 times. Wow, 5 times. So Indonesia is not a new country for Mr. Luna. Give applause for Mr. Luna. Hopefully next time we will have more time to just go to some destination place in Pekalongan to buy some batik. Okay. Mungkin Bu Nana bisa mengagendakan kapan-kapan gitu. Iya. Yeah. Okay, it's an honor for me, Eros Melina Sofa, as the moderator to guide this international guest lecture program. And the title of this guest lecture program is Public Lecture on Sexual Violence Emergency, a victimological review of the concept of restorative justice in the cases of sexual violence. We know that sexual violence is not only a problem in our own country, especially in Pekalongan, but it's a global problem. In every side, every country, in every time, sometimes sexual violence treats anyone, not only women, but also men that also treated by these kinds of violence. So for the audience, we have only 60 minutes here, including the material, some explanation from Mr. Luna, and maybe after that, for the audience, you can deliver the question and answer session for about 15 minutes. So the audience, please prepare your questions if you want to deliver some questions. And now, please give applause for Mr. Luna, and Mr. Luna, time is yours. Please give applause.
Finally. Hai. Selamat pagi. How many of you are familiar with कुछ कुछ होता है? तुम पास आए? You know the meaning of it? कुछ कुछ होता है. You know the meaning? Yeah. Understand what it is? What is it? Something is happening in the heart. And then तुम पास आए? तुम पास आए is when you come closer to me. When you come closer to me, then कुछ कुछ होता है. Now I think your wisdom will make you translate the whole song. Okay? Yeah. This is also relevant in the context of sexual violence. Okay? There's kuch hota hai. It's also nice. Yeah. So that is also relevant in the context of sexual violence. Do you agree? You think kuch hota hai in sexual violence? Yeah. Tum paas aaye. Sexual violence. Right? So it's complicated subject. Okay? It's difficult to comprehend. It's not because it has the concept is tough. It's because what we are doing today is complicated. Restorative justice in sexual violence cases is complicated. It's not an easy process, and that is why it has not been implemented so far. Okay? If you take Indonesia or India for that matter, we have restorative practices, mediation, peace conferencing, peace circles. All of these are in practice. But when it comes to sexual violence cases, it is very difficult to have restorative justice practice in sexual violence cases. Why do you think is that? Why do you think sexual violence, in cases of sexual violence, restorative justice is difficult?
Okay, so students, baik teman-teman, mungkin saya campur ya bahasanya. The students, do you know actually sexual violence, what is it? And why do you think that this is an important news to discuss in this moment? Kenapa perlu dan kenapa sexual violence ini untuk kita jadikan seperti ini? Any response, any answer? Please, anyone?
Any response? Why do you think it is difficult?
Yeah. If you think, kalau mau pakai bahasanya campur nggak apa-apa. Nggak apa-apa. Pakai bahasa Indonesia campur nggak apa-apa. Nanti saya coba bantu untuk menjelaskan ke Mr. Konan. Oke. Silakan. Ada? Okay, yeah, please. Would you like to introduce your name? Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Alif. Maybe I just answer the question first. Why is the sexual violence is the tough problem to solve? Because the culture maybe, because of some adat dari dulu gitu kayak banyak budaya yang masih feudalism that from the masa lalu sampai sekarang tuh kayak ada kayak apa ya, hierarki sosial di mana perempuan itu menjadi objek. Jadi kenapa ini susah? Karena kadang-kadang juga masyarakat menganggap bahwa kekerasan seksual itu adalah tabu. Jadi in my environment that sexual violence is kind of taboo, and if we expose it to maybe our mom or maybe the friends, we actually it's like I'm afraid, or maybe they are afraid to have bad impress for the social, something like this.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to mention your name, Mbak?
My name is Alif.
Alif,
Yes.
Alif. Okay, thank you, Alif.
Thank you, Olive.
Give applause for Alif.
Thank you, Olive. That was a good response.
Okay, any
Of
other?
course, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, of course it is tough. What Alif just mentioned is secondary victimization, the fear of secondary victimization, that you will be blamed if you disclose something happened against you, right? So when you tell this to other people, you fear that this person might not receive you properly, this person might not attend to you properly, this person might not believe you properly, right? So that fear of being blamed by other person for the crime that has happened against you, that fear is called fear of secondary victimization. The primary victimization is the crime, that rape, for example, sexual assault, right, stalking, murder, whatever is the crime, that is primary victimization, the first victimization. Secondary victimization is a negative attitude, victim blaming, these tendencies, the stereotypes, the stigma, right? All these are secondary victimization. So the fear of secondary victimization in victims will push them away from accessing help, right? I have to go to police station and lodge a complaint for me to initiate the process of criminal justice system, right? Only after I file a complaint with the police, then the matter will be taken to the court. But before that, before I go to the police station, if I'm scared, if I'm feared that the police might not take me seriously, the police might blame me, my family will not respect me, then I will not even go to the police station. I will not even tell this to anybody in my family. So the fear of rejection, the fear of blaming the victim will prevent them from accessing mainstream support. Okay, they will not go to police station. Now we are talking about a practice which is less popular, which is less known, which is not being effectively used, which is restorative justice. What is restorative justice? So let's say I am a victim of rape, okay? And who do I take an example? So this person here is the offender, right? You are the offender, I am the victim, all right? Offender and the victim. Now, how do you do restorative justice between both of us? Okay? How do you bring me and the offender to a same room and make them talk? Right? Two people, this person has harmed me, I am the victim, but you are asking me to come to a room and talk about the harm and the harm caused by the person. Will you agree to this? If you were a victim of a rape, right, God forbid, if you were a victim of a rape, would you be willing to participate in a process where your offender is sitting across and telling you why he has done this to you? Will you be interested in doing that? Will you be willing to do that? If you were all victims of some serious offense, would you be interested in talking to your offender? Would you be interested in forgiving this offender if the offender is feeling guilty about the crime that he has committed? Would you be interested in doing that? Right? And this hesitation that you all have right now, okay, this is the reason why the restorative justice could not be effectively implemented in the cases of sexual violence especially. Restorative justice, you understood restorative justice? There is a victim, there is an offender, and there is peacemaking happening between the offender and the victim. Okay? And this is done differently, in different ways. Sometimes court will ask the offender and the victim to participate in restorative justice. Courts can also mandate. Sometimes it could be outside the court, meaning your case will not even enter the court, you are settling the matter outside the court. Even there, restorative justice can be implemented. Without filing a police complaint, you can sit with the offender and sort your issue. Okay? Restorative justice has been effectively implemented. It's been very, very successful in petty crimes like theft, robbery, some mild violence, attacks, right? Burglary of your home. In such cases where there is economic crime and some kind of slight physical violence, restorative justice has been very, very successful. But when it comes to sexual violence cases, it has been least applied, least researched, and very difficult to conduct. And for these reasons, restorative justice is very, very complicated. We have talked about the difficulty of the victim with the criminal justice process. Secondary victimization I mentioned. Victim finds it very difficult within the criminal justice system. How many of you would feel comfortable going to a police station? How many of you would be comfortable going to the court? We would not want to. We want to avoid any instance of going to a police station or the court, right? That's because the fear that we will not be heard, the fear that the police might blame us, the fear that some kind of crime might happen against me, right, by these people who wants to safeguard my rights, okay? Sometimes the legal system, okay, legal system meaning the court, the police, the criminal justice system, might feel like trying to talk to someone through 3 or 4 layers of people. Before you meet with the judge, you're going to meet with the low-ranking police officer, high-ranking police officer, then you go to your lawyer, your defense attorney, and then you meet with the judge. So there are different layers within the criminal justice before you access a person who is giving a verdict in your case, a judgment in your case. Before that happens, you are meeting different people at different levels. Okay? Please go back. I will tell you what. See this. Okay? Almost like it's there to remove you from confrontational and healing. Right? This is your victimization. Crime has happened against you. You have been a victim. And this person has been an offender. Right? So this matter is between him and me. Okay? This is between 2 people. What is police doing and what are courts doing in this private matter? Right? What is the role of a court or a police in a matter between, in a conflict between 2 people? Why are we letting that happen? Why do we have police? Why do we have criminal justice system? Or why do you have Sharia law or any other law in practice? Why do you need somebody to solve your issues? Right? So this is, it has a history. We all agree to elect our governments, give them the authority to protect us. In return, that we gave them the power. We gave some people power to govern us, to protect us, and they are doing that. So whenever a crime happens, it is violation against the state authority, a state's control over its citizens. Now the state becomes obligated, the government becomes obligated to do justice to you because it failed in the first place to protect you, right? If some of my family member has been murdered, now the state also has failed in protecting my family member. Now the state feels guilty for not doing its job. Now it wants to correct it. Okay, that is the process of criminal justice system. Because they fail every time in protecting, now they want to undo the damage in some ways to you. And this process of undoing, reversing the damage caused to the victim, one important way of undoing that is punishing the offender. Sending the offender to jail is one way of criminal justice system responding to the victim. But if I ask you, do victims want their offenders to be sent to prison? What is justice for victim? What is justice? What do you see as a justice for victim? A rape victim, what do you think a justice could be for the rape victim? Now you send the offender to the prison. Will that reduce the harm caused to the victim? Will that heal the wounds? Will that heal the emotional injuries that have happened to the victim? Will that help the victim recover financially? Will it provide any money to the victim if the offender is sent to jail? So this mainstream process, this traditional process of sending the offender to the jail will not do any good to the victim. It is not doing any benefit. The state's purpose is served, but how about the victim's purpose? Who is caring for victim in this process? So the idea that victims are not being adequately served in the criminal justice system is the reason why we have restorative practice. Is also the reason why we have restorative justice, where you have victims' voice heard loud. Okay, victims will be given a voice to tell the offender directly that what happened to me because of you, how I felt when this crime has happened to me. And victims will have several questions. Why did you choose me? Why did you harm me? Right? What did you think about causing this harm to me? Why am I? Why am I your target? This is a very common question that victims have in their mind, and they will get to ask the offenders directly. Okay? There will be a direct conversation that will happen between the offender and the victim about the questions that the victim have. Now, victim will have a chance to recover. Victims will have a chance to heal. And offender will have a chance to confess. Offender will have a chance to express the guilt. Offender will give the explanation why this person has done that. Okay? Their side of the story will be shared to the victim. And there is a possibility that there could be some healing happening in the process. In this, offender is not let gone free. Offender will be sent to prison. But there could be milder punishment. Instead of 14 years, there could be 10 years reduced punishment. The offender will be sent to prison. There could be some financial fines can be attached to restorative mechanism. Victim could get some money. Victim could get apology. Victim could get reparation. Right? Most often, victims are not revengeful. Victims do not want to seek revenge for the offender. All they want is to be the abuse to stop, the damages to be recovered, right? To be able to restore back to the previous functionality of the victim is the ultimate goal of the victim or the victim's support. Next slide. Does punishment prevent violence? Does punishment prevent violence? If our criminal justice system is very effective, then why do we have increase in crime rate? Why are crimes increasing every year if punishment is very effective? You also have statistics of crimes, right, in your country. Every year there will be data published about the number of crimes occurred in your country or in your province. Do you see that it's reducing or do you see that it's increasing? Crimes are increasing everywhere, globally, locally, nationally. The crime rate is increasing. But if punishment could reduce the crime, right, but it's not reducing. Punishment is not reducing the violence or the crime rate. Then why do we still have punishment as a major traditional response towards the crimes? Next slide. Only 0.7% of perpetrators of sexual crime are convicted through criminal legal system. Meaning, if there are 100 rapes, the chances are that only one offender will be convicted. Out of 100 rapes, the chances are only one. Only one offender will be sent to the prison. Okay? Yet, punishment criminal justice system is a major response mechanism. Punishment rarely happens anyway. And when it does happen and the assailant is convicted, there is 88% chance of reoffending. If you send an offender to the prison, the chances of this person coming out of the prison and committing a crime again is 88%. Okay? We are answering a question, what purpose does punishment solve? What is the purpose of punishment? One, you're not able to punish properly. Out of 100 cases, you're only able to punish 1%. And even that, when you are punishing, the chances are that this offender will commit crime again is 88%. So meaning punishment is not an effective way of addressing sexual violence cases. The next one. Next slide. So our entire criminal legal system, depending on the idea that punishment will stop violence and enhance safety, is fundamentally flawed. Okay? You cannot trust the idea that punishment will reduce crime rate. Punishment will solve the problems within the society is fundamentally flawed. Does punishment help the person who was hurt? We talked about it. Victim is not benefited by sending an offender to prison. Okay? Next one. So what are alternatives to punishment? So one of the important alternatives is restorative justice. Okay, we will see what restorative justice is very soon. Next slide. So the basic assumptions of crime, punishment, criminal justice system are that there are shortcomings of the criminal justice and its incapacity to assure peace in social life. We have discussed about it, right? The government has failed in the first place and so the crime has happened. If the government was doing its job properly, none of the crimes would happen in the society. Okay? Because criminal justice system is failing, there is crime. Niels Christie, he has proposed an idea of conflict of property. In the beginning of the lecture, I've asked what is police doing between two people's issue? What is a lawyer doing between two people's conflict? Right? If this is a private matter, what is this third person doing in our business? So this concept is called conflict of property. If crime could be viewed as a property, I am the owner of my victimization. If it could be seen as a property like a car, like a bike, like a home, if it is seen as a property, I am the owner of this crime that has happened to me. And he is the owner of the crime that he has committed. What is this third person doing? Right? When the lawyer enters in between, he takes away the conflict away from both of us. Okay? So lawyers steal. You all when you practice tomorrow, you are going to steal the case of two people. Actually, it's none of your business. Right? This is how societies functioned in earlier times. They used to sit together and solve the issues that happened between them. Even when you look at indigenous laws in your country, the tribal laws that you have, there you do not have police interference or the courts interfering. They have people sitting together and solving their issues. Even the serious cases like sexual violence could be talked out and solved between people. There could be ways in terms of conflict resolution happening in locally. Okay? So now this idea that somebody is hijacking, somebody is taking this conflict away from the owners like victim and the offender, that concept is called conflicts as properties and conflicts are stolen from the original owners. This idea is given by Niels Christie. He is an abolitionist, meaning he does not want criminal justice system at all. He wanted it to be removed permanently. Next slide. So crime has its origins in social conditions and relationships in the community. We all agree. Crime is bred by the social conditions, the societal status, the economic status, right? How good the society is, and all those factors the crime is dependent on. And crime prevention is dependent on communities taking some responsibility, right? It is not just the police, not just the politician, not just the lawyer who can protect all of us. Community should also take some responsibility in terms of handling their issues. The importance of informal justice and victim rights movement, restorative justice, is because of dissatisfaction with the traditional criminal justice system. Next slide. So what is restorative justice? So as defined by Tony Marshall, it is the process whereby all parties with a stake in a particular offense, okay? All parties with a stake in a particular offense, it could be any crime, okay? Like it is him and I, right? My family members, his family members, the society that he belongs to, the society that I belong to, my lawyer, his lawyer, we're all stakeholders in this particular crime. All those people come together and talk about what happened, how it happened, why it happened, what should be done next. Okay? So this conversation that happens between the relevant stakeholders of a particular crime, talking about why, how, what, and what needs to be done in future to reduce the damage for the victim and to increase the possibility of offender realizing the mistake, not repeating it, admitting the guilt, and promising that he or she will not do it again in the future. So all these aspects will be covered in restorative justice. So restorative justice prioritizes repair and healing, repairing the damages and healing the victim instead of punishment. And instead of focusing on which laws were broken, okay, this is what criminal justice system does. This is what police and the lawyers do. What are the laws that are broken? Instead of focusing on that, it focuses on the people that were harmed. Okay, people that were harmed. It could be victim's family. Sometimes the offender's family, offender themselves, were also harmed in the process of committing a crime. Okay, so all those who were harmed in the process of the occurrence of the crime, it can provide a solution to heal their wounds. And that is why the restorative justice, if practiced rightly, if introduced at a right time and practiced rightly, it could be a very, very effective tool for the healing process. Next slide. So like old traditional practices, even when you look back at your indigenous laws, you see that some of the restorative principles are applicable in that practice. And you could trace some origins back to the traditional practices that we have. But in the Western world, RJ began as an experiment. So one of the advocates, probation officer then, he just introduced the concept of restorative justice, where an young offender was asked to do community service instead of punishment. Instead of sending this offender to prison, that probation officer decided to award 2 weeks of community service, but not send this youth to the police. So that was the first time restorative justice came into practice in the Western world. Okay? And since then there were several variations, several models of restorative justice practice that are evolved. We will look at that. The next one. So philosophy of restorative justice, it is a process which gives the victim a forum to ask questions. Do you agree to this? Right? When you make an offender and the victim sit together in the same room, now offender and the victim both have questions. Right? Victim has more questions to ask to the offender, want to know why this happened to her, why did this person harm her, right? What was going on in his mind when it was doing it? There will be several questions that a victim wants to know. So it gives a forum to ask questions, receive answers, gain understanding, explain the impact of the crime on them, and contribute to the outcome of the process. Contribution to the outcome. So victim will have more participation and more decision-making authority in the process. In the court, in the regular criminal justice system, victims are not allowed to speak. Victims are not allowed to say the story. Victims are not part of deciding the quantum of punishment. Did you ever see any victim telling, I want this offender to be sentenced for 10 years and that is valued? Did you ever see this happening in any court? Right? You will not. Judge will decide for how many years this offender should be sent to prison. They will not ask the victim. Okay? Whereas in restorative justice, victim will be consulted. Victim will be asked what should be the ideal punishment to this offender. Their opinion would be mattering. Their opinion would be taken seriously in this restorative practice. So the process may result in the victim receiving an apology. Did you ever see an instance where in the court an offender is apologizing to the victim? It doesn't happen, right? In most cases, all the victim wants is an apology from the victim. They want their offender to feel sorry for what they have done. That is all they want. And these simple things are not handled in the traditional criminal justice practice. They want restitution, services for some other form of reparation. All these aspects could be met in restorative justice. Next slide. So a restorative justice process encourages the offender to gain insight into the causes and effects of their behavior. Now this offender will also have a chance to hear the victim about the kind of impact this crime had on the victim. Okay? Now the offender is first hand getting information from the victim about the impact of their crime on the victim. Now victim will tell, what you did is so terrible, I had to stay in hospital for 5 nights. I had to undergo a surgery, right? My husband divorced me because this is what you've done this to me, right? So all these aspects of the crime from the victim's perspective could be told to the offender directly and help the offender realize the impact of their behavior on other person. So it gives an opportunity both for the victim and the offender to talk to each other, to tell their sides of the stories to each other. So restorative justice gets the community involved in a variety of preventative and responsive programs. Okay? You could also make the community members part of, the responsible community members part of this process, where everybody discusses on one common outcome. Now there would be a promise from this offender saying, I will never commit this crime again, or I will not go to the location of the victim where she stays. Right? There will be some kind of commitment given by the offender in front of all the community members. So now the community members can serve as watchdogs to this offender and ensure that this person is not violating any kind of commitment that is made. Next slide. So what is the difference between mediation and restorative justice? Mediation is also bringing both offender and the victim together and having a conversation. The fundamental difference between mediation, you know mediation? Yeah? Fundamental difference between mediation and restorative justice is that in mediation, there is no need to take the blame. Okay? There is no need to take the blame. You can still negotiate, come to a common agreement, and resolve the matter. So offender need not be blamed, right? That is mediation. Whereas in restorative justice, it only begins with admitting the guilt. The offender will have to say that, I feel sorry for doing this. So that is the entry point into restorative justice. So blame is clearly identified, guilt is clearly attributed towards the offender before the RJ process begins. RJ is restorative justice. The next slide. So these are some of the facts about restorative justice. Alternative forms of punishment rather than alternative to punishment. We are not introducing restorative justice as alternative to punishment. It is only an alternative form of punishment. Like I said, there will be punishment component attached in the restorative practice as well as an outcome. Prisoners will be sent, offenders will be sent to prison. Right? It will happen. It's just that it is more a healthier and more recovery process. Among the most over-evaluated and under-practiced areas of criminal justice system. Okay, this is less practiced, but overly talked about. There are no published evaluations regarding restorative justice and sexual violence. There is no research on whether restorative justice is useful in cases of sexual violence or not. Very limited research is conducted. It's because it is practiced very limitedly. Okay? Because RJ is practiced less, there is not much scientific data also available in cases of sexual violence. There is profound lack of empirical evidence. Yes, there is not much research available. And it is partly due to the exclusion of sexual violence from most restorative justice programs. So wherever you see restorative justice program, you would not see that it is applied in the cases of sexual violence, right? There has to be a shift in that process, and you have to try. You have to see whether this is useful, whether this could be applied in cases where the victim wants it to be taken. Okay? The next one. So what are the parties with a state in offense? There is a victim, there is an offender, the families of each, any other members of their respective communities who may be affected or who may be able to contribute to the prevention of reoccurrence. Okay, so these are all important stakeholders for the restorative justice. Next one. So you see this overlap. There is community, there is victim, there is offender. It is the interaction between these three important stakeholders. Next slide. So this coming together, this restorative process coming together of victim and offender, it may occur as one event. So you could finish this in one single session, or you could have multiple sessions, meet over a few instances before you come to a resolution. And it can be used at many stages of the criminal justice system, like pre-trial, during the trial, during the sentencing, post-sentencing. At any stage, you could introduce the concept of restorative practice. You could invite parties to take part in restorative justice process. And it can also be used entirely separately from the criminal justice. Like for example, I said in the beginning, you don't even have to file a police report for you to be part of restorative process. Okay? There is no requirement for that. If you are willing to, there could be a mediator who could be set up, appointed by legally, and you could conduct the restorative process. So there is no requirement for filing and report with the police. Next slide. So the facilitator, the one who mediates this restorative process is the facilitator. This person has to be neutral with the required skills to conduct the negotiation, required skills to conduct the mediation, right? And this person has to prepare people for the restorative process. You have to check the readiness. Is the victim voluntarily want to participate in this restorative process? Do the offender want to willingly participate in this process? Do the offender know? Do the victim knows what will happen when they meet with each other? So this kind of preparedness has to be ensured by the facilitator. And the facilitator also must ensure that it progresses in a safe and civilized manner. Here you are letting a person who was once violent upon another person, right? There was a history of violence. So you have to ensure that the victim and the offender both are safe in this environment when you are calling them for restorative process, right? Anybody could be aggressive towards the other party. Victim could turn hostile, victim could turn aggressive towards the offender because she felt hurt, she felt abused. There can be some instance of violence happening in the process. So it is very, very important that facilitator ensures the safety and the well-being of people who are participating in this process. And facilitator also takes the responsibility to guide parties through difficult phases. Okay? So it is the duty of the facilitator to ensure that the process is smooth, they are moving from one stage to another stage, right, and successfully finishing this restorative process. Next slide. So these are different models of restorative justice. Some of you must have heard about some of this. Victim offender mediation, VOM, family group conferencing, community conferencing, circles, peacemaking circles, peace circles, restorative cautioning, restorative conferencing, truth and reconciliation commissions. You must have heard truth and reconciliation commissions happening in South Africa, in some other places, right? So these are all variations of restorative justice. These are all different models that are being tried and tested in different parts of the world. Next slide. So after the offense, after the crime has happened, RJ could have several benefits. It can ensure the material well-being or satisfaction of the victim. Material well-being, monetary compensation could be provided, restoration could happen, restitution could be given by the offender directly to the victim, attention to the victim's emotional needs. Okay, victim was felt very, very hurt. So somebody has to listen to that pain, right? And if it is directly done to the offender and the offender is in a meaningful way, healthier way receiving this conversation, then it provides space for healing. Resolution of any conflict between the victim and the offender, right? And giving the offender a chance to absolve their own feelings of guilt through apology and reparation. So restorative process can give a chance to the offender to apologize for the crime that the person has committed. Next slide. And the implications for the future after the crime has happened, right? Tackling the reasons for the offender. Okay? It will help you understand why an offender committed a crime in detail. You would know in detail why this person resorted to committing crime. What are the factors that contributed in this person to commit the crime? Right? Is it because this person has a history of drug abuse? Is it because the person does not have money? Is it because of poverty? Is it because of one's own history of abuse? Why? Why is this person resorting to crime and harming another human being? So this person will be able to help you understand the reasons behind committing the crime. Okay, when you have restorative practice going on for larger population, you will understand crime in greater detail. Producing a plan for rehabilitation and agreement among family and community members, this we discussed earlier. So you bring all the relevant stakeholders to the table and you have a conversation. There will be agreements, there will be some kind of commitments done by the offender, and you will have a proper tracking in place because community is also part of it. Okay, it will ensure that one, you are addressing the crime that is already happened, and two, you are also addressing from the preventative point of view. You are also helping reduce the reoccurrences of this crime and future crimes by engaging parties in restorative process. Next slide. Beginning of the lecture, I've asked, why is it difficult to apply restorative justice in sexual violence cases? Because as a nature of violence in itself, as a nature of crime, sexual violence is very different. It is different from most other offending behaviors because it occurs in an intimate context. Okay, this is It occurs in a private space. It occurs behind the closed doors when nobody sees. There are no witnesses to this, right? Mostly, 99.99%, you will not have a witness to sexual abuse. You will not have a witness to sexual violence, rape or sexual assault. There are no witnesses. It's happening behind the four walls. Okay? It is an intimate context. Because of its dynamics and specific trauma, and because it often happens between people who are acquainted. In most often sexual violence cases, the victim knows the offender. Victim and offender are related in some way. Okay? This is statistically true. Yeah? Victim knows the offender in most of the cases of sexual violence, which also sets a different context for any kind of invocation of criminal justice process or restorative process. In most cases, there will be some form of past, perhaps present and even future relationship between the victim and the offender. Like I said, they are acquainted. They know each other in most often cases, right? So there could be a past history, present history, and some kind of future issues happening between these two people, which is why sexual violence is different when in comparison to other forms of crime. Next slide. So why is RJ in cases of sexual violence so contested? Why is it RJ not welcome in sexual violence cases? The important concern is victim safety. You are bringing victim in the same room as the offender, right? The fear that this offender might do something again to the victim is real, and because of which they are not able to engage in the process. Manipulation of the process by offenders, it is possible that there could be minimizing, neutralization, trivializing of the harm done to the victim. Offender might say, this is no big deal, right? You can get on with this, you can move on from this, right? There could be trivializing of victimization happening, which is also again a risk. Pressure on victims. Victims' interest may be minimized or marginalized by the offender, community or professionals. These are all some of the fears about RJ in cases of sexual violence. Conflicting loyalties, especially if the offender belongs to the same family, if the offender is a relative or a family member, there will be different pressure that is put on the victim in terms of withdrawal of case, complying for lesser punishment, right? There could be several manipulations which could also happen. Public interest not served. The public interest is to send the offender to the prison. In the restorative practice, that may or may not be an outcome. So public interest is not served. So these are all some of the important reasons why RJ is not very much welcomed in the cases of sexual violence. Next slide. So why do victims of sexual violence want it? Okay. Why do they favor restorative justice? These are some of the reasons. There is less than 5% of victims are shown to report sexual violence because of the secondary victimization. We've discussed this already, right? Because of secondary victimization, people do not come forward to file a complaint, to take help. Okay? And RJ takes trauma-informed and victim-centric approach, right? Restorative justice puts the victim at the center. Victim's voice becomes important. Victim's opinion matters. Victim's decisions will be valued. Victim's story will be heard. So victim is at the center. So when you put victim at the center, why would victim not want to contribute to this? Why would victim not want to take part in it? RJ focuses on healing and transformation. We have talked about it quite a lot. It is a process which can enable a victim recovery and offender recovery as well in the process. Next slide. So RJ in action in sexual violence cases, you see some instances in different countries where RJ is applied in cases of sexual violence as well. So there are a number of examples of restorative justice being used in cases of sexual violence. One important example is Project Restore in New Zealand. It is driven by the survivors of sexual assault. Denmark, South Africa, South Australia, UK, US, several counties in UK, they also have variations of the restorative practice being applied in cases of sexual violence. And there is certainly more readiness for this restorative practice in several Asian countries as well. Okay, people would want to try this out to see the effectiveness of this in their own context. Next slide. These are some of the benefits of restorative justice in sexual violence cases. Information and voice. Okay, giving voice to the victim, hearing the narrative of the victim, getting answers to the victim, right, from the offender directly. Recognition and validation of harm. So everybody who is participating in the restorative process will recognize the harm done to the victim. They will value it. They will say, yes, I understand. I acknowledge your pain. I know what you are going through. I can feel it. I can sense it. So these are some of the conversations that other people will have with the victim, which provides the required validation for the victimization. Okay, somebody is valuing it. So that feeling would be left with the victim. Assure that no further harm is made. Commitment from the offender that I will not harm you or harm anyone else in the future. So that kind of assurance is guaranteed in the restorative outcome. Safety, growth, closure, and healing. All of these are possible. Restoring safe relation with the offender. It is possible after the RJ process. The offender and the victim could meet their eyes, could have a conversation in some other context. If they meet, they will not have hatred or awkward feelings, right? Because you already provided a healthy platform for them to talk about. Release bad feelings, okay? Confront the offender, demystifying the offender. So all this point until RJ initiated, the victim has different impressions, different assumptions about the offender. She must be thinking that this person is very, very inhumane, very bad, very terrible human being, right? All of these are assumptions because he has done something harmful to the victim. But after listening to the offender side of the story, that perception might change even for the victim. They might think he is a nice human being, but because of the circumstances, he has done this crime towards me. Okay? So that kind of understanding could be facilitated through the process of RJ. Empowerment, self-worth, self-respect, self-confidence, sense of control, new identity, both for the victim and the offender. There is a possibility of ensuring this happens. The next slide. When you look at other benefits of restorative justice in sexual violence cases, it is not very different from the restorative justice in other crimes, in other crime contexts. Okay, the process also begins the same way. The outcomes could also be the same. There is a possibility to express one's experience and story and being heard, plan a reparation of the harm caused or suffered. There is a chance to reclaim the voice, not as victim, but as a survivor. Okay? And victims can have their questions answered, like, why did you do it? Okay? They can ask the offender directly, why did you choose me? Will you do this to me again or to someone else? How much guilty do you feel for the suffering you caused me? These are very, very common basic questions that the victims have in their mind, and most often they do not get answers because they never get to meet their offenders after that. Right? They are put behind the bars, or the offender has happened something to the offender. Right? Most often they will not be getting answers to these questions. Next slide. It can support the rehabilitation of sex offenders. Right? The victim can help the offender also become normal, get some kind of treatment, commit to treatment. So all these possibilities can happen in restorative practice. They encourage a genuine acceptance of accountability for the offender, sincere expression of guilt, motivation to participate in therapeutic treatment, and a personal journey of transformation for the offender. So all of these are positive benefits that can happen through restorative process. The next slide. So this is all. So we understood what is restorative process, why should there be restorative process, right? Why is it difficult in the context of sexual violence cases? How is sexual violence different from other kinds of crime, right? And what are the examples of the practice of restorative practice in various contexts? So we've seen all that. So now what is the way forward? For example, John Braithwaite and Heather Strang have suggested that the tentative evidence of victim satisfaction in restorative programs should be sufficient to impose an obligation on all of us to be open to the possibility that restorative justice has something to offer to some victims. Very, very important statement. It says that even with the slightest evidence that restorative justice could work, we should be willing to apply it to all contexts. Okay? Because you did not research it, because you did not try it out, you should not undermine the benefits that RJ could provide, restorative justice could provide. Even if you have a slightest hint, you should take a leap into the faith and then start applying it. Okay? Because it has potential benefits. Risk assessment, planning, and support should be emphasized if you want to try out restorative practice. You have to carry the risk assessment, you have to plan it very well, and you have to have adequate resources to support this process. The expertise and training of key personnel is also crucial. You have to have trained facilitators to conduct restorative practice. Restorative justice and the criminal justice system, there is no need to see them as separate entities. They can work together, right? Restorative justice could also complement criminal justice system, could also provide additional support in the criminal justice system, can take away the case burden, can reduce the offender's guilt, can reduce the offender's burden. Victim recovery can be guaranteed in the restorative process. Next slide. And it should not be limited to only to specific crimes and specific offenders. This is what has been happening until now. RJ has been restricted to very specific crimes, to very specific offenders, but there is a possibility that it could be applied to severe violent crimes as well. Restorative justice in cases of sexual violence has a role to play in meeting some of the needs and expectations of some victim survivors. So I'm not saying that RJ could be applied universally to all crimes and all victims could be benefited. But if there is an interest, if there is a willingness from a victim to participate in the process, there should not be a limitation on that. There is no reason to say, no, we cannot do this for you, right? There has to be an option for the victim available to be part of a restorative process. Because you're not an expert or you have not tried this in your country, it doesn't mean that you will limit an offender or a victim to participate in the process. So victims should be given a choice to take part in the restorative process, no matter what the crime has been committed to them. Okay? So it has to be given as an option, at least, because there could be some victims who would want to take this part, who would want to participate in restorative process. So RJ in cases of sexual violence does demand greater scrutiny, no doubt. No doubt. You have to make sure that both parties feel safe, especially the victims feel safe to be part of this process. You have to ensure the safety, you have to have greater scrutiny, expertise, greater preparation and risk assessment must be conducted, and therefore you would also require greater resources to be able to facilitate this process. But excluding RJ is not justified because it can be very, very effective, can be very useful, and most importantly, some victims might want to take this path because the traditional criminal justice system does no good to these victims. Next slide. So Lucy is basically a victim of sexual assault. She has been part of restorative process. Right? There are several examples, several case studies of people with sexual violence participating in the restorative process and reporting the positive experiences in the process. They all felt restorative justice has helped. It helped them in recovering, it helped them in healing wounds, it helped them in getting answers, it helped them in helping the offenders as well sometimes in some cases. Right? Most of the literature that you find online, you will see the benefits reported by the victims themselves for taking part in restorative justice. Lucy's case is one such example. So Lucy was asked, will you recommend another victim like you to be part of restorative process? Lucy has taken part in the restorative process and she felt helpful. When she was asked, would you recommend this to somebody else? Would you recommend this to some other victim? She said she would say to another woman considering restorative justice in similar circumstances, she replied that if the woman was at the right stage in her recovery, sufficiently strong to undertake a conference, and after ensuring the necessary professional support and careful planning, then she should take a deep breath and do it. Okay, this is what she said when she was asked, would you recommend this to some other victim like you? Okay, then she said, yes, why not? Okay, if there is enough planning, if there is enough safety ensured, if there are professionals who are practicing it, I wouldn't stop this victim to take part in the RJ process. She would recommend, saying that you should go ahead and do it. Okay, so you would see quite a lot of cases, right, in the literature available where there is positive benefits reported for being part of restorative process. Okay, just because we are not prepared, or just because we don't have the resources, we don't have trained personnel, or we don't have enough scientific evidence, right, validating the purpose of usefulness of restorative practice, it doesn't mean that it is not a potential tool. Okay, it should be tried, it should be practiced for us to know the effectiveness, the benefits of this process. It has been very, very effective in petty crimes. The small crimes, it has been very effective. And it is time that we also look this in the context of sexual violence and see the applicability of it and do it on a larger platform. Next slide. Yeah. Thank you so much. Terima kasih.
Thank you. Give applause for Mr. Bayu Prakasmina. Okay, so for the audience, as we listen from the explanation delivered by Mr. Bayu Prakasmina, PhD, that sexual violence is a common problem in every world, every side, and every country. So the restorative justice also is not a just simple and single phase to conduct. It's a very complicated phase to conduct. So the students, maybe the audience here, not only the students but also the lecturer, if you have some questions, because we have very limited time, so please, if you have some questions, just raise your hand. Maybe only for 3 questions for the first session. 3 questions, okay? Yeah, 3 questions. Untuk 3 penanya dulu, jadi kalau ada yang mau bertanya silahkan, mungkin dari dosen ataupun mahasiswa boleh angkat tangan dulu. Ada? Okay. The male student over here, the second one, second, and okay, the third. It's like they are very enthusiastic to ask. Okay. Introduce your name.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Oh.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Rizky Baila, majoring in Islamic Family Law. My first, in our college, UIN Kiai Haji Abdul Rahman Pekalongan, too much maybe to happening case of sexual violence. Sexual violence still a secret and taboo, but in many culture kiai, culture feudal, culture etc. And I think, in fact, many figures do of sexual violence. Need underline, perlu digarisbawahi, all this time system solution until on the level pelanggaran etik atau ethical breach. And according to me, tidak ada atau there are no special sanction. How do you respond about the solution there? Thank you.
Thank you. The first question or the next question? Oh, we'll answer. You answer that, okay. Okay, yeah. The question from Mas Rizky, from Mas Rizky. What do you think and what's your solution? Because there are many kinds. According to Mas Rizky, there are some sexual violence that happen around us. And sometimes sexual violence is kind of taboo, and sometimes the people who are the victims, they are too afraid, as you said in the previous. So how can we provide a solution about this phenomena that happen in our environment? Thank you.
There are several ways of doing it. One, you already have the systems in place, like you have police stations, you have courts in place already. The problem there is with the trust, that the victims do not trust the police, do not trust the courts to provide them with the justice. Okay? So there could be several ways of building trust by social activities, by awareness activities, by victim-friendly policing initiatives, right? There could be several ways in which you can help victims build trust on these existing mechanisms of legal approach. Okay? That is one way of doing it. And when you talk about institutions like educational institutions, like universities and stuff, in India we have Internal Complaints Committee. You call it ICC, Internal Complaints Committee, and COGSASH sexual prevention of workplaces. There are several laws in place, right? You could look at what is guaranteed in your country as a law, and constitution of certain committees like this will ensure that there is a place where these victims could go, talk in confidence, and get some resolution of this process, right? So setting up internal complaints committees within institutions, right? A smaller institution like this could be one way of doing it. If you already have it, then it's great. But thinking about it on those lines, so basically having a place where victims could go and tell them what happened, right? Whether that will guarantee a solution, an outcome or not, that could be secondary. But at least to begin with, to provide a space for the victim to talk, to go to a place, meet with people, tell them what happened, and have this listening ear provided to the victim. All this also play a very important role, irrespective of the outcomes that it can come out of it. Okay? So one, building the trust with the existing mechanisms in place. Two, thinking about starting newer initiatives so that you can provide support to maximum people, and there could be maximum resources available. It's just not the police that the victim should always go to get a solution. There could be places like this, where there could be community-driven initiatives. There could be NGOs, non-governmental organizations, which could work effectively and solve victims' problem in comparison to the police stations or the courts, right? So wherever victim can have confidence, wherever victim can trust, right, that should be the place that should provide support to the victim. And we could create more places for the victims to trust us. Okay?
Oke, jadi intinya untuk mengatasi kekhawatiran, mungkin tadi keraguan yang ditanyakan Mas Rizky ya. Berarti yang pertama kita harus percaya dulu dengan sistem yang nanti akan bisa menangani permasalahan ini. Nah, sistem itu yang mungkin di kita perlu ada atau tidak di negara kita. Kalau kita lingkupnya UIN, kita sudah punya sebetulnya ya. Ada PSGA yang punya ULT setara, yang mungkin di situ kita sudah ada space, ada ruang yang bisa kita manfaatkan untuk pengaduan seandainya ada sexual violence yang terjadi di sekitar kita di lingkungan UIN Kiai Haji Abdul Rahman Pekalongan. Dan tadi yang di slide itu tadi ada Lucy mengatakan take a deep breath and do it. Jadi tidak perlu ragu, tapi percaya dulu pertama. Harus percaya dulu dengan lembaga atau tempat yang akan kita tuju itu. Tidak harus selalu semuanya larinya ke polisi, jika tidak wajib seperti itu. Gitu, oke? Next question. Tadi Mas siapa? Ya.
Bismillah. Thank you, Mr. Guru. Let me introduce myself. My name is Muhammad Islam Laula, the Sharia Economic Law Study Program from Syariah Faculty. Permission to ask Mr. Banu. I'm asking about these two things. Number one, what is the position of victims of sexual violence in the restorative justice process based on victimology? Do they take total sides with the victims or with the interests of the wider community? Artinya, bagaimana posisi korban kekerasan seksual dalam proses restoratif justice berdasarkan victimology? Apakah berpihak secara total terhadap korban atau kepentingan masyarakat lebih luas? Number 2. Thanks. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Mas. Islam. Okay, the next question coming from Islam. He asked about actually, can restorative justice actually can pretend also or can be in the side of victim, or it just only provide the like the justice or punishment only for the offender? Is the restorative justice can be the side with the victim or not? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Restorative justice benefits both offender and the victim. Okay. When you look at in comparative terms, you have criminal justice mainstream system, traditional way of responding to victim, and there is an alternate which is restorative justice, right? But if you see which is more victim centric, I would say it is restorative justice. But it doesn't mean that it is biased only for the victim. But it is more victim centric in comparison to traditional criminal justice. Because victim here will get to speak. Victim can ask questions. Victim can get answers. Victims can complain. Victims can tell their stories. Victims can make offender feel accountable, make them feel guilty, right? Victims can also participate in the decision-making process. Victims can also be part of ensuring that this offender will not commit this crime again in the future, either to them or to some other people. All these possibilities are there in the restorative practice, and these are all victim-centric views, which is missing in the traditional criminal justice system. When you look at on the face of it, it feels like traditional justice system is offender-centric, whereas restorative justice is victim-centric. Definitely. Restorative justice is victim-centric, but I also want to tell you that both victim and offender can benefit from restorative justice. Okay? In traditional criminal justice system, nobody benefits. Right? Nobody benefits in traditional criminal justice system. You send an offender to prison, who is benefited? Is offender benefited? Offender family benefited? Right? Is the victim benefited? Is the victim family benefited because their offender is sent to prison? Nobody is benefited in the criminal justice system, but in restorative justice, you see there are several people who can be benefited. Right? And so it is more useful and more healthier approach to handle crime in the society. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bhairapanas. Bisa dipahami? Bisa? Saya tanya sama yang penanya dulu, penanya ini paham ya? Paham, kalau paham kan berarti tidak perlu diterjemahkan ya? Apakah memihak ke victim? Selama menurut penjelasan dari Mr. Brantos tadi berarti iya. Ya, karena di situ di restoratif justice itu ada step-step yang di situ memang untuk healing juga para victimnya, tidak hanya sekedar justice-nya, tidak hanya memberi punishment saja kepada offendernya. Jadi untuk sisi siapa victimnya tadi, memang dari restoratif justice akan mengupayakan agar victim itu tidak merasa benar-benar jadi victim dan alone sendirian. Jadi di situ ada tadi step-stepnya, ada pendampingannya, ada healing untuk mentalnya dan sebagainya, gitu ya ringkasnya ya. Kalau tadi sudah paham kan sebenarnya tidak perlu saya terjemahkan ya. Oke, maybe this is for the last chance ya. Ini untuk yang terakhir kan, because we have very limited time. Is it okay, sir? This is for the last question because we okay. I'm so sorry, sir. Okay, the last. Tadi nggak jadi? Oh yeah, yes please. Would you like to introduce your name, please?
Sebelumnya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Introduce myself, my name is Ulul Aini. I'm from Constitutional Law Study Program. Permission to ask, sexual violence is often carried out in spaces that are difficult to reach. So, that evidence of sexual violence is often lost and undetected. However, in reality, sexual violence occurred. Question: what is the proof in case of sexual violence? If evidence is difficult to find, can the burden of proof be reversed so that the perpetrator must prove that he did not commit sexual violence? Pertanyaannya, bagaimana pembuktian dalam kasus kekerasan seksual jika alat bukti sulit ditemukan? Apakah dapat dilakukan pembalikan beban pembuktian sehingga pelaku harus membuktikan kalau tidak melakukan kekerasan seksual? Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you. So the next question is about the evidence of how can we prove that there is a sexual violence or not if sometimes we lost the evidence or proof of the sexual violence. Thank you.
How can you prove? There are no witnesses, right? There are no witnesses to this kind of crime. There is offender side of the story and the victim side of the story. Okay? That is all you have. Victim is saying that yes, this person has committed this crime only. Now offender is saying that no, I was not at that place. Right? Now how can you prove this? There is nobody who has seen it. Unless it happened in a context where there is a witness, right? In most of the cases, because this is the nature of the crime in itself is a private matter. Okay, this is very, very private crime that happens. There are no witnesses. There could be evidence which could be collected through forensic gathering of evidences. Okay, the medical team could investigate and establish the fact whether a sexual violence has happened on this victim or not. Medically, it could be ascertained. But you cannot accurately ascertain whether it is this person who has committed this crime on this victim, right? Medically, you can tell within 24 hours to 48 hours if a medical practitioner examines the victim based on the injuries that have happened, right? During the intercourse, there could be some ways of assessing whether there is aggressive penetration which happened, which could be established medically. That is possible, okay? But if there are no DNA evidences, like for example, if the sperm is not left, if there is no skin that is left in the nails of the victim, so these are all forensic evidences which could be gathered. But if you cannot have that, you can establish the proof that the victim has been subjected to rape. Rape has happened, but you cannot with accuracy say that this is the offender, right? You cannot bring that link if there are no evidences. So then victims and narrative becomes an important tool, offender and further investigation, the past history of offenders, the crime record. So all of it will be taken into consideration when you are trying to establish, ascertain the truth of this particular context. It is difficult, and that is why you have very poor conviction rate. That is why you have secondary victimization happening. It is victim side versus the offender side in most of the cases, right? How can you prove the guilt when somebody is not admitting to it because you don't have any other evidence to support? That is why you have only 0.7% conviction rate and only 5% report to the police. Okay? Very poor reporting because victim cannot support themselves, right? It's that I am telling that it happened and you have to believe. And why will anybody believe if there is no evidence? And this is on the victim's mind. They would not be motivated. One, there is social stigma, there is secondary victimization. And two, you yourself is not convinced or confident to tell this to other person that this has happened to me because you don't have any other evidence to support it. So all of this complicate this entire sexual violence context, the criminal justice response in this context of sexual violence, pretty more strong. It makes it more complicated. And that is why you need an alternative process of serving these victims as well. That is also an argument why you need practices like restorative justice. At least some healing is done. In criminal justice, when the victim is not given a chance to speak, no reporting happening, there is no resolution. There is no healing, nothing. But at least in the restorative practice, if the offender is freed from the punishment, if the offender feels that, yes, I will not be sent to prison if I participate in the restorative process, maybe it is possible that the offender admits to the guilt, says that, yes, I've done this, it was my fault, I was stupid, I was not thinking properly, I've done this to her, right? Without the fear of punishment, they may admit to this. And the victim sometimes is just, that is what the victim wanted to hear, an apology from the offender. Now, victim is on the path to healing and recovery. Offender is contemplating, offender is thinking that I have harmed some other human being in a ways that are unimaginable. I should not be doing this to somebody else. So it solves, it provides a space where there is prevention, there is addressal to the current crime, there is reparation, there is restitution. So all these positive elements are attached to restorative process. Okay? So we have to think beyond gathering evidences, beyond investigation, beyond catching the offenders, and to be able to think, how can I serve the victims better? So you have to move from catching the offenders, punishing the offenders, to serving the victims better. So this idea has to shift, and that is when you can make restorative practice possible. Okay?
Okay, thank you for the answer. Mbak Ulul ya? Bisa dipahami? Jadi intinya rangkaian restoratif justice itu kan lengkapnya, tapi juga lama prosesnya. Jadi di situ tidak hanya sekedar untuk offender saja, tapi juga victim. Nah, bagaimana tadi buktinya? Buktinya kalau misalnya bisa dengan forensik, pakai forensik. Cuman kadang memang tidak bisa dibuktikan apakah betul kesalahan ini dilakukan oleh si A, si B. Bagaimana kita bisa membuktikan kesalahan ini yang sudah dibuktikan dengan forensik ini juga kesalahannya si A. Nah, ini yang mengharuskan yang namanya restoratif justice juga akan mengupayakan si offender ini agar bagaimana step-step yang dilakukan agar si offender ini mengaku, si pelaku ini juga mengakui kesalahan dia. Karena itu proses RG di sini bukanlah proses yang simpel dan sebentar, tapi akan membutuhkan waktu yang lama. Healingnya untuk victim juga lama, membuat si offender ini untuk menyadari kesalahannya juga lama. Dan ini yang mungkin agak susah untuk dilakukan memang. Jadi kalau sekiranya ada bukti, serahkan bukti itu. Kalau tidak ada, adanya misalnya di badan si victim itu ada, ya pakainya forensik. Dan tadi juga disampaikan oleh Mr. Banu, kalau memang sudah ada kalian, ya semoga sih tidak ada ya di sini. Kalau memang ada korban, entah bentuknya seperti apa, kalau dia diam, nanti kedepannya bisa jadi ada korban-korban lain, dan dia juga bisa jadi korban kedua lagi seperti itu. Karena itu kalau ada keluhan seperti itu, maka dilaporkan saja agar tidak terulang kembali. Begitu, Mbak Ulul, ringkasannya seperti itu ya. Oke. Okay, so the main session of this international guest lecture entitled Public Lecture on Sexual Violence Emergency, a victimological review of the concept of restorative justice in cases of sexual violence. Time is up, so after this we will have some closing statement that will be delivered by Mr. Banu Prakasnona regarding to this topic. Please, Mr. Banu Prakasnona, if there is closing statement.
Yeah. So far we've discussed that sexual violence is difficult and application of restorative justice in sexual violence is difficult. Okay? But nevertheless, we also understood that it has several benefits. It's just that you have to become more aware, have more trained practitioners, have a victim-centric approach. You have to think the victim first. When you're talking about a crime, when you only think victim first, then you will be able to prioritize victim and think what can help for the victim. I'm also not advocating that restorative justice could be applied universally. Okay, I'm not saying that. There could be offenders, there could be victims who are not interested in taking part in restorative justice at all. All they want is to send this offender to the prison. That could be the expectation of the victim. But in my practice, in my experience, I've also understood, I've also seen that there are victims who would want to have a different solution than send the offender to the prison, right? Offender to jail, okay? So for those victims especially, you cannot close the doors. You have to have an option to let them participate in the restorative process. If both the victim and the offender are willing to take part, you will have to provide that support mechanism in place. And you will see that there will be several victims who would want to participate in this process when they realize that it could be more beneficial to them instead of approaching the traditional criminal justice way. Okay? So we have to provide them options first and see that whether the victims are ready to take it or not. It cannot be the other way. You cannot ask victim whether are you ready, can I provide the service? No, that will not work. You have to say this is an option that is available to you. Would you like to take it? Okay, that has to be the way to approach the victim. You cannot ask them first and then serve them later. Right? You have to have the service available to them and ask them, would you like to take it? So that kind of approach will make more meaningful in the process of serving the victims. And victims would appreciate such kind of approach where they're given options. When you tell them, these are your options, what would you like to do? Right? And asking these simple, important questions will make a lot of difference. Outcomes in the process of victim support will become least important. Trust me on this. The outcomes are least important. Victims are not bothered by what will happen at the end. What is more important for the victim is how are they being treated in this process of reaching the end. Okay? I went to police station today. How am I treated by the police person? Am I trusted? Am I valued? Is my story believed? Right? So these are the things that matter to the victim. I went to the court. Did the lawyer listen to me? Did the judge give me enough time to talk? Right? Is the offender in the offender's place? Is he not misbehaving? Right? These are the important things that the victim would like to be addressed. So they pay more attention to the process than the outcome, and it has to be our guidance as well. We have to pay more importance to the process outcome will eventually happen, right? Whether it is victim satisfactory outcome or not will depend on the approach that you're taking and the evidences, like in case we discussed. It all depends on the evidence. But who is stopping us in treating the victim better? So nobody is telling us you should not treat the victim better. But we are doing that. We do not treat victims better. And that is where we have a lot of area to improve, and restorative justice is one such way where you can guarantee that victims could be served better. The process would be victim-centric, victim will be valued, victim will be heard, victim needs will be prioritized, as well as offenders will also be heard and prioritized in the process. This is a win-win situation actually. A win for the offender and win for the victim, and why not try this? Okay? Just because the nature of crime is so stigmatic, is so stereotypical, is so less talked about, it doesn't mean that we should not try it. If there are people who can take it, we should give it to them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Give applause for Mr. Bayu Prakash. Yeah, so everyone, all the audience, ladies and gentlemen, the audience of this international guest lecture, we have heard and we have get new insight about the sexual violence regarding the concept of restorative justice. So I hope that this international guest lecture with the theme will be very beneficial for all of the audience, and the audience know what should they do next if they get this kind of action. And it also will be a new reference also for Ibu Ningsih barangkali as the PSGA and ULT Setara. This is a kind of reference ya, mungkin bisa menjadi referensi atau bahan pertimbangan kembali langkah-langkah yang harus diambil, tidak hanya di unit PSGA saja, tapi juga untuk seluruh institusi di UIN Kiai Haji Abdul Rahman Wahid Pekalongan. Baik, so please say thank you. We say to deeply grateful for Mr. Bayu Prakash. Sekali lagi boleh beri tepuk tangan sebelum kita masuk ke penutupan. And as a volunteer, we say also thank you for all the audience. Thank you, and time, please back to the Master of Ceremony.
Thank you, Mr. Bayu Prakash, PhD, and Mrs. Eros Melina Sofa. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to close the international guest lecture today. We would like to express our gratitude to guest speaker and audience. So, as Master of Ceremony, I would like to say thank you and apologize if there is any mistake. Okay, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much for being patiently listening to me all this time. And I would like to formally thank the Rector, the Vice Rectors, the Deans, the Vice Deans, and the Administration, the International Office, and Dr. Ida for taking me to this campus, making this initiative possible. Thank you so much. You've been lovely today. Thanks a lot. Terima kasih.
Mungkin untuk audiens bisa berfoto bersama dengan the speakers.